So today we are going to go through chapter 8. We're looking at avoiding and breaking plateaus. We definitely know the plateaus are going to happen. Everybody plateaus at some point. We got to figure out why so that we can make adjustments and course corrections, right? So after this section, we want you guys to sort of know how to like set appropriate goals, because that's another thing. Like, you know, a lot of times the reason people plateau is because they will often set an unrealistic goal. And then like they can't actually achieve that. Help our clients actually overcome that plateau so they can reach their goals, and then talk about the rationale behind like why this actually happens so that we can confidently explain it to our clients. So hitting plateaus, very, very common. We know that like I said, like honestly, everybody's going to plateau at some point, you know. It's just something that occurs through any weight loss program. So a lot of times people will say like, I don't get it. I'm eating very few calories. I'm you know, exercising regularly. Why the heck aren't I making progress? Why is this, you know, stopping? And it's like, there are just going to be some things happening in the background that often explain that, right? And so we'll talk about some of the non-medical causes, because obviously there might be some physiologic reason, some medical reason that's outside of our scope of practice. But for the most part, we're going to talk about like the reasons for like plateaus and how we can sort of break that up and change up a routine and, you know, kind of bust through that. So when we look at like why plateaus happen, a lot of times, honestly, we go back to that first law of thermodynamics, right? So remember, like the first law of thermodynamics says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. They can just be transferred from one form to another. So like what we mean when we say that is like, look, if calories enter your body, they are now stuck in a closed system. You cannot get rid of that energy. It can change. You can change its shape, right? You can turn that hamburger's calories into squats. You can turn it into new fat cells. You can turn it into glycogen, new proteins. It can change form, but the amount of like energy, the 528 calories, right, or whatever, they're in there, and they are, you know, stuck. And so in order to, you know, burn that off, you need to like actually do more physical activity. Something has to happen to get it to change shape from one way to another. So that's sort of what we're talking about when we're talking about plateauing, right? Your body is constantly trying to balance itself out. Your body doesn't want to necessarily lose weight. It wants to maintain homeostasis. But if you give it too much energy, it has no choice but to store that energy. And the same thing is true of like losing energy, right? If you burn too much, it has no choice but to like keep you moving by tapping into energy. But unfortunately, on that tapping into energy side of things, it does have a couple tricks to sort of slow you down to keep you from burning as much energy. A lot of times the reason people plateau is because they will slow down in other ways in their lives, right? So like when we talked about like that NEAT, right? Like some people who will exercise really intensely, and then that will actually cause them to sort of slow down throughout the rest of the day. And they've tracked this in people, and they've noticed that like, you know, some people, like let's say, you know, Joseph, let's say you're working out like crazy, you go to the gym and you burn 1,000 calories while you're in the gym. It's pretty freaking good. That's an intense workout, right? And then what will happen is your body will sort of naturally turn up your hunger hormones a little bit. So you might sneak in a couple extra calories here and there, right? And that makes up for a balance a little bit. And then throughout the rest of the day, you're just exhausted because, hey, that workout was really hard. So then you'll end up moving less in the rest of the day. And those calories will actually balance themselves out. They've noticed that people who work out actually sometimes will burn less energy than people who don't. And it's because they'll slow down in all the other ways, all the stuff outside of exercise. It's pretty crazy to think about, right? That's not always going to be the case, you know, especially if you are like conscious of all this stuff. But that's one of the things that can sort of explain a plateau. So your body is trying to get you to plateau. It wants to plateau, because plateau means balance, right? It means that there's not too much energy coming in, there's not too much energy coming out. Your body wants to get here, right? So there are sort of like physiologic adaptations here. You know, that's a big part of the reason why sometimes people plateau, right? So one of the biggest reasons is a physiologic adaptation, right? Like the body literally, it's like, well, this exercise stuff was very stressful in the beginning, and your body was like, holy crap, I need to get stronger, right? Like that's the sort of reaction that we've got. And so that causes, that causes your body to go into overdrive trying to overcome this new stress. But once you're sort of good at it, it's not really stress anymore, right? The more you develop like neuromuscular efficiency, the harder it is for you to burn calories with the same workout program. Like think about the first time you ever tried to do like a plank. It was very difficult probably to stabilize your spine and hold you in the right position, right? But then as you did it like more and more and more, you got better at it, right? You found like slightly more efficient ways to do things. So because of that, you burn just a little bit less energy. Look at like a stabilization program, right? That's a really good example. If you did like a full stabilization circuit, right? Like what's the example they have? Circuit stabilization. They had like the examples earlier. Let's see if I can find this workout from the textbook, because I think they just pull it straight out. Maybe not, but let's say you do like a single leg balance into a plank, into a squat jump to stabilization. Yeah, all of these are very unstable exercises, right? So if you were to do all of this, right, what'll end up happening is your body will actually get better and better and better at it. It might be the same number of reps, might be the same number of sets, the same weight and everything, but your body is no longer as stressed by those unstable exercises. Like being on the ball was real wobbly the first time, and then a little easier the second time. So a lot of times that can definitely explain why people plateau. And then the other one that is kind of controversial and hard to bring up sometimes is non-compliance to a program. Unfortunately, non-compliance often comes because people think that they are adhering to the program, but are not. I'm not saying they are lazy. That is definitely not what I'm saying, right? It's just people often have like a misconception of how many calories they bring in. People often have a misconception about like exercising, right? Like you bring somebody to the gym with you, you're the trainer, you push them really hard, they burn a ton of calories, they work super, super hard. Great, they go home exhausted, right? They come in to do their homework. It's the same exact workout routine, and they come in, a couple days later because you're not training them. They're doing their homework, right? Maybe you only meet with them once a week or something. And they come in and then, they're just not pushing themselves as hard, right? Like they're working for sure, but it's definitely not as effective, right? And so because of that, they're just going to burn way less calories. They're like, I don't get it. I came in, I did all my homework, I worked out 3 days a week like you told me to. And it's like, you did, but unfortunately, like we had a different perception of sort of what of what how many calories you were going to burn, right? How much energy that was going to take. So that's a big part of this, right? That's going to be a big explainer there. So sometimes there's nutrition aspects, sometimes there's exercise aspects. Sometimes people will move less after like a routine, or they'll just consume more calories. So there'll be non-compliance issues, right? Again, we know, or maybe the math was calculated wrong, but we know that like theoretically the math is perfect. It never actually works out that way, like because we are very flawed in how we approach things. But we do still know exactly like what has to be done in order to sort of create that deficit. Okay, cool, right? Like let's do that. And do it slowly over like the right amount of time. We'll still get there. We just have to make course corrections every now and then. That's how we overcome plateaus. So here's some of our sort of a rapid fire approach to sort of like overcoming this problem, right? So let's say your client is experiencing like physiologic adaptation, right? They're just getting better at the exercise. Well, the body, like I said, it's going to burn a lot of calories in the beginning because it doesn't necessarily, know how to move properly. So it's like you set up a workout routine, right? You do like a circuit training, like 3 sets or whatever, right? And then like they go through it and they're like, God, that was really tough, right? And then the next time they come in, they do the exact same thing, same number of sets, same number of reps, right? But the body is a little bit more used to it, right? There's just a little bit of stability. The nervous system knows how to recruit and it knows how to balance. Like think about like, let's just imagine like 2 people both doing single leg bicep curls, right? And one person's never done single leg bicep curls before, and the other person has been doing them for 4 weeks. You know, if you look at the first person, they're probably going to move something like this, right? They're going to be on one leg, and they're going to be like, you know, they get the first rep in, and then they stabilize, like, okay, good, and they bring it back down, they're like, and they bring themselves back up, and they do the next rep, right? Whereas the other person is just knocking them out, right? So it takes the first person, you know, 3 sets of 12 reps, takes them, you know, 4 minutes to get through. Whereas like the first person doing it, they maybe got it done in 2.5 minutes, you know, of like total lifting time, right? So that is a little bit of what's happening here. Like one person's nervous system is adapted, so it just doesn't burn as many calories because they're good at the exercise, right? So one of the reasons why, one of the ways to sort of like overcome this sort of lack of progress that they're feeling is to track a lot of other different types of things. So pay attention to their weight, pay attention to their body fat percentage, pay attention to their circumference measurements, right? Like track all of that and be like, your client goes, I don't get it. Like, you know, I'm not necessarily losing weight. And it's like, yeah, but you are losing inches, or yes, you are doing this, or hey, the weight that you're lifting is going up. Like you may not necessarily be, you know, losing a ton of fat, but like you are definitely getting stronger, which in, you know, the long run is going to make you like metabolically burn more calories and stuff. So like we are gonna see this weight come off eventually. We just got to figure out like how to get the plateau to sort of break, right? And that can be really encouraging to keep your client on. So this is another reason why I always tell you guys, I really like having lots of data points when I'm training my clients. I like to know their inches. I like to know their body fat percentage, their scale weight. I track every pound that they lift while they're in the gym. And one of the things you can do that has become more popular in weight training in the last few years is you can also track the RPE, like the rating of perceived exertion. Normally we do that with cardio. We would say like, hey, David, I want you to go for a run. I want it to be somewhere around like a 7 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. Like you should be able to maintain like a 6 or a 7. You should be able to maintain like the jog for 20 minutes, pretty uninterrupted. I don't want you to run fast enough that you get out of breath and then have to slow down. I want you to maintain a consistent pace for 20 minutes, right? It's about a 6 or a 7 on the RPE scale. That's the rating of perceived exertion, right? Whereas like, you know, let's say I'm talking to John, I'd say like, hey, John, I want you to take it up to like an 8 on the RPE scale, like 7 or 8, and then go back to like 6 and 7. So like you do 1 minute at an 8 and then do another minute at like a 7, you're gonna be in a really good spot. Like you should, you know, the 8, like I don't want you to be able to keep that up. If you can do 3 minutes at an 8, you're going a little too you're going a little too gentle. So make it just a little bit tougher, you know, and then recover back at like a 7. That should be like your jog pace. That's pretty consistent. You can do that for like 20 minutes uninterrupted. So a pace that you can't do for 3 minutes and for 1 minute, and then do a pace that you can do for 20 minutes for 1 minute, and just go back and forth between those two. That's an RPE of 7 or 8, right? That's the modified RPE scale. The actual RPE scale is like 6 to 20. I would have said, you know, somewhere between 13 and 14 or 15 or 16. Anyway, I digress. So that RPE thing has been getting way more popular in weightlifting in the last like couple of years. Like power lifters have been adopting this, what used to be very much like a cardio thing. And so what you do is like at the end of all of your sets in your workout journal, off to the side, you're going to put an RPE. You're going to say, that felt like a 6 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. And that's like, hey, you know what? If every set felt like a 6 out of 10, it's time to raise the weight. You know, it means that you're not working very hard because your body is adapted. So now you track, you know, not only the weight that they're lifting, but also how they feel about the weight that they're lifting. So that's a really good way to be like, you've plateaued. Great, let's make it harder, you know? Body composition changes will also often explain a plateau. You know, as an individual's body weight reduces, guess what? Their caloric expenditure is going to reduce as well. So this is easier to see when the calories are higher. But let's take a look at a BMR calculator here. Let's say you've got a 45-year-old female client. You know, she's 5'10" and she weighs 225 pounds. We hit calculate there. she's probably, and she's exercising like 4 to 5 times a week, right? So she's burning 2,558 calories per day. You've been working with her for a couple months, and then she hits a plateau right around 200 pounds, right? Well, she was burning 2,558. She's lost 25 pounds now. Hit recalculate here. It's all the way down to 2,392. So 2,558 minus 2,392. If you haven't changed her diet, that is going to be a caloric deficit now of 166 calories difference, right? So 7 days a week, that's about a third of a pound less that she's going to be losing per week, right? So there's a little bit of physiologic adaptation there, right? Body composition changes are going to affect things for sure. And, you know, if she loses muscle mass in that time, because maybe she was like being really extreme where she's not getting enough protein in her diet, you know, that's going to make it even more intense, right? So if there's not a reduction in calories, a weight loss plateau will occur because your body is eventually getting back into balance. The same thing is true of like weight gain, right? Like, let's look at like a sedentary person. You know, let's take a look at a sedentary person. We'll just say like, you know, this person here, you know, they're burning about 2,060 calories per day. And then they get a new job where they're even more sedentary, right? And so now let's say this person eats 2,100 calories a day, right? So that's a difference of 40 calories, which is not very much, but it's every day, you know, or at least Monday through Friday. So what eventually ends up happening is their body needs to creep up in body weight, right? We hit calculate, you know, it goes up by 6 calories, goes up by 6 calories until eventually, oh, that's too much. They get to like 167 pounds and then boom, now it's in balance again, right? And so all of a sudden they stop gaining weight, right? Like that's the small changes that we're talking about here. And so those are definitely going to affect plateaus because your body is trying, it's not even necessarily trying, it just gets into a balance, right? Like it's just mathematics, you know, and physics. It all kind of balances out because the amount of energy is consistent. So as a person like experiences body composition changes, their caloric intake will reduce naturally. If there's not a reduction in calories, then you're just going to end up plateauing. And that's one of the reasons why like weight cycling is so bad. Like people who go on like really extreme diets, you know, who lose like a substantial, you know, yesterday we were looking at people who diet alone, right? They don't do any exercise. So like 67% of the weight loss is body fat, but the remaining like 33% was muscle mass, right? So if we go back to that BMR calculator and we calculate out like body fat percentage this time, 45 female, 225 pounds, and we'll say 33% body fat, just for the sake of it, right? So this person was burning, we said, they're exercising for 2,700 calories a day, right? And then they lose, let's say 30, we'll say 25 pounds, right? So 25 pounds, and so 25 times 0.67, that's going to be 16 pounds of fat. So now they had a body fat percentage of 33, so it's 25 with 74 pounds of fat. So now minus 16.75, they have 57 pounds of fat. 200. They got a body fat percentage of 28.7. That's still pretty good, but 28.7, 200 pounds, right? They lost a substantial amount of muscle there. Their BMR is going to go down from 2,700 to 2,589. Right. Whereas one person who is sort of able to maintain their muscle mass, if they brought that down to 25%, it would actually have only gone down by about 20 calories. So that's a substantial difference as well, right? Like people who diet alone will lose muscle mass. Their metabolism will be slower. They're not slowing their metabolism, but they have less stuff to burn because they have less muscle mass. So then eventually, like on the same diet, eventually they'll start gaining weight back, but with less muscle. So it will make it more difficult to lose weight in the future. And that's why plateaus suck. So that's the balance, right? That's the mathematic balance, it's like lifestyle inflation. Any of you guys who've looked up like personal finance, you've probably heard of like lifestyle inflation. You hear these stories about people who win the lottery and you're like, oh my gosh, like, they must be set up for life. And then sure enough, like in a couple years, they're right back where they started. And it's because like, they spent that money rather than like made that money work for them. We were talking about this the other day, but I was like, if I just had like an extra, just if I won the lottery, like not the lottery, but if I just won like a $200,000 lottery, that would be enough I could turn that into like setting me up for life. I'd still work my job regularly. I would just invest that money and let it sit and eventually like retire in like a few years and live below my means, like that is, that's creating like, a surplus going in the right direction. But a lot of people will, sort of create a deficit. That analogy has to be reversed for muscle and fat loss, unfortunately, but like that is exactly how that works. But your lifestyle inflates, and it's like now you're trying to drive a Lamborghini instead of your Prius. Like you're gonna be spending through all that extra money you got. So then we got non-compliance, and this is obviously like a really big one, right? We know that non-compliance, people who underreport their calorie intake, people who over-report their caloric expenditure from their workouts. This is a big reason why a lot of people plateau. They might miss a meal from home and then they go out to eat, and they're like, I looked at the menu, it said it was 450 calories, and it's like, yeah, that's what it said on the menu, but like, you got some guy in the back who's like whipping this thing up. He puts a little bit of extra mayonnaise or a little extra olive oil, just going to have extra calories in it. Eating out makes it very difficult to track calories, unfortunately. It's just not going to be as perfect as stuff that you have control over, where maybe you are making sure you're getting the right portion sizes and things like that, right? Oftentimes people will forget to put stuff in food logs. That's a really common one. It happens all the time, right? Like you'll put your meals in a food log. Everybody's pretty good about remembering to put their meals in there, but what'll end up happening is they'll forget to, they'll have like a brownie or something, some small thing that like somebody's just like, offering at the office, and then that causes them to just, forget to report that. So underreporting calories is a big one. Over-reporting caloric expenditure. Again, people will say like, I worked out 3 days this week. And then you look at how they were working out and it's like, oh, you were kind of, you were going through the motions. Like, yeah. And I do this, like we all kind of slip into that sometimes, where it's like, you go do, you get up, you go do your workout, and you come back and you're like, that wasn't that hard today. It's like, ooh, it wasn't that hard today means that I probably just didn't push myself very hard today. Got it. Our perception of how hard something is often, pretty misguided. It's often not very accurate. So we can minimize that with things like heart rate monitors. That's a really good way to sort of like adjust that. Accelerometers and pedometers, things that are tracking your steps. Those are really good ways to sort of minimize errors. Yesterday I played Ultimate, and I was like sprinting out and I was just exhausted, and I was like, what the hell? And then I remembered that I gave blood the day before, and I was like, oh, that, and the same thing happened last week. The last 2 weeks I've gone out to Ultimate, I've just been sucking air, and then I'm fine by Saturday, my Saturday game, but my Wednesday game has been rough both times. And I was like, God dang it, so I feel like it's really hard, but the thing is, chances are I'm not burning that many calories because I'm not really moving my body as intensely, but my feeling of my perception of how hard it was really high, so that's another sort of like approach that we need to like kind of take a look at, right? Track lots of statistics, right? That can be a really good way to kind of do this. So a lot of times, guys, when it comes to like breaking a plateau, it's not so much about like some major big change that you have to make. It's really just like little things, like you can make an adjustment in your diet by taking your portion size and making it a little bit smaller. You can keep your caloric expenditure really high by taking a short walk. Teaching your clients to sort of like, get up during a commercial break and like go do something, active or whatever, right? I had a trainer friend of mine, and your clients do not need to do this. you don't need to do this. She was a weirdo. But I actually love this girl. But like, she was talking about how like she was like, she does this thing where when she's driving, if she's at a red light, she'll just brace her core and like pull her belly button towards her spine and like, create some abdominal bracing. And then the light will turn green and she'll go back to driving. And then every time she gets at a red light, she just tightens her core. And she's like, it just makes me really like conscious. And I was like, all right, like that's cool. I don't think you have to do that. I think that's a little bit extreme, but I do think the lesson there is good, right? That's a good way to ensure that like you're just staying a little bit active. You're trying to reduce the time that you are sedentary as much as possible. The more often you can do that, the better. So those are some of the main reasons that we're going to see plateaus. So now let's take a look at like some of our strategies to help our clients actually bust up these plateaus, right? So one of the things you can do is you can reassess your daily calories, right? Obviously, we already talked about like, look, your calories are going to change. So, it may be time to make an adjustment, right? It may be time for us to sort of adjust our caloric expenditure, right? So let's say we have a client, let's say, actually, you know what, let's go to a calorie calculator here. Let's say I'm training Edwin. Edwin, how old are you? We're gonna say, wait. So let's say like, 165 pounds. We're trying to like put on, let's say we're trying to put on muscle mass, right? Because this can go in both directions, right? So if that's the case, and we want to like put on some muscle mass, right? We go for weight gain. We're going to go for a half a pound a week, right? If we're consuming about 2,769 calories a day, that's going to result in a little bit of like weight gain, right? And that's pretty good. But let's say we've been doing that for, let's say 4, maybe 6 weeks, right? Well, now, obviously the body weight has changed. And if we hit like a plateau all of a sudden, that plateau is going to mean, oh, like we need to increase our caloric expenditure because now the body is back in balance. So we reassess, we check the new body weight, we see that it's closer to 170, we hit calculate, and now suddenly the weight gain is actually up to 2,800 calories. So we need to increase it by about 50 calories a day. The exact same thing is true of clients who are trying to lose weight, right? We got a client who's trying to, experience a little bit of weight loss. They're at 2,300 calories, how much they need to intake. They lose 10 pounds. Instead of 2,300 calories, they need to bring in like 2,236, right? So we just by 100 calories. It does not need to be massive adjustments, guys. It really, like for me, whenever my client plateaus, I'll leave it alone for a week. If I see that it still doesn't change within that week, I'll make a 100 and maybe 150 calorie adjustment. So that can be very effective. And one other way to do this is sometimes like if you notice that your client is like losing too much lean body mass, this is a classic thing that happens sometimes. Maybe they're just not getting enough like, calories. Even if they are getting plenty of protein, they just don't have enough calories, right? You notice that like their body fat percentage is dropping not as fast as like their weight is dropping. And it's like, ugh, you're losing a substantial amount of lean mass. You can do what's called like a zigzag diet. And a zigzag diet is it's a little bit more complicated, unfortunately, to like give your client and like lay out that diet. But basically, we take a look here. You can do like a zigzag like this, which is like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You can see like different calories here. So we're going for the weight loss category here in the middle. So it's like 2,700 the first day, 2,000 the next day, 2,000 the day after that, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, and then back to 2,700 calories. So it's like 2 days of like 2,700 calories, and the rest of them are around 2,000. That would work. Personally, I don't love that schedule. I think that's actually kind of the reverse of how I would do it, because that is assuming that like you eat extra calories on the weekends. I would say eat extra calories on days that you are working out. So like, what you need to do in order to calculate this out. Let's say your client is trying to lose weight. So that's 2,281 every single day, right? So 2,281 for a 7-day week times 7. That's 15,967 calories per week, right? So what we do is we have them exercising Monday through Friday, right? Let's say they're strength training Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. They're doing cardio on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are the days we want to have our extra calories. So what we do is we say, okay, so we divide that by 7, right? That's 22,081 a day. So we know that, right? So then we add 10% to that on Monday through Friday, right? So that's going to be an additional 50% overall over the whole week. So times 1.1. So that's going to be 2,500 calories every day, Monday through Friday. So now 2,509 times 5. That's 12,000 calories, 12,545, right? I forgot I need to do this beforehand. What was the weight loss number? God dang it. Oh, 2,281 times 7. So they need 15,000 calories a week, right? But Monday through Friday, they're going to get 12,000 of that. So minus 12,545. So there are 2 days that they're going to have the weekends off. On those days, they're only going to eat like 1,700 calories. So they're going to take it easier on the weekends. That's a way to zigzag your diet. I do think that is more effective. One problem with this, though, is it requires like a lot of willpower because the weekend is often where people overeat. So maybe instead, yeah, we do the low calories Monday through Friday, and we allow ourselves to cut loose on the weekends. Whatever zigzag is going to work for your clients, guys, that can be an effective way to kind of break up a plateau. We got a little in the weeds with the calculator there. I will let's step out of that. So another thing that you can do, and this is a surprising one, but you can have a client take a week off from training. So they can take a week off. Now, if the body has become like really adapted to like super vigorous exercise, doing a deload can be a really effective tool for helping with like breaking up a plateau. However, this really should only be happening if your client hasn't fallen off the wagon in the last like 10 to 12 weeks. Like if they've been absolutely crushing it like 3 months in a row, yeah, maybe now it's time for a really effective deload. Me personally, I like to mix in a deload every 4 or 5 weeks. So like a deload is just reducing your volume ever so slightly, so like let's say let's see here, Brad Schoenfeld's got a great he's got a really great example of like how to do like a deload. It's not quite, that's part of the article. Let's try super compensation. No, I can't find it. All right, that's fine. So what you'll do is like, let's say you're working like really intensely, right? So create a table here. So exercise, sets, reps, intensity. So your exercise, let's say it's a deadlift, right? Actually, you know what? I don't need to put intensity. This is week 1. Blow this up so you guys can actually see it. So let's say for week 1, you're doing like a deadlift, right? You're doing 5 sets of 5 reps, and you're taking 3 minutes of rest, right? This is a really great maximum strength routine. So then you're doing the same thing with the bench press, right? 5, 5, 3 minutes. And you do the same thing with like a bent over row, 5, 5, 3 minutes, right? Okay, so there's your week 1. Now in week 2, you're going to make this ever so slightly more intense. We are going to take that from 5 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 3. So the reps go down, but the intensity goes up, right? You're going to lift much, much, much heavier. And then in week 4, you might do, or week 3, you do the same thing, but instead of 5 sets of 3, you're going to do 5 sets of 5 for the first set, 5 sets of 3 for the second set, and you're going to retest your 1 rep max on that third set there, and then do that for 2 more, right? One. So you're just retesting your 1 rep max multiple times. So this becomes like a very, very highly intense routine in that third week. So now on week 4, you're going to do a slight deload. So you do all of those things again, right? But this time, instead of 5 sets, you're just going to do 3 sets of everything. And you're going to keep the reps a little bit more gentle. You're going to take it back to like 5, right? With 3 minutes of rest still. So the exercise becomes pretty much the same, but you're just doing 2 less sets each time. So you can be pretty gentle about it. Or you can do like 3. Honestly, a lot of people do 3 sets of like 3. So then week 5 comes along because you've deloaded, right? Now things are going to be much gentler. You can repeat that whole cycle with new weights and everything goes up by, 5 pounds, right? So, this might be, let's see here, 1 rep max calculator. So let's say you were doing like 300 pounds on your deadlift for 5 reps, right? So like, I will put an intensity column actually. So this should be like 85% each time. And then this is going to be about 90%. And then this is 85 slash 90 slash 100%. So that one's the complicated one. And then here, because it's your deload week, honestly, you just do it at like 85% or maybe even 70%. You really just want to drop it down. Even though it's 3 reps, you're doing a lightweight. And then we go back to that new 85%, right? Because you've retested and you're going to try to amp the weight up, right? Does that make sense, guys? The deload schedule? It's just a really good way to kind of reset. All right, so that's you can take a week off from training and you just do a simple like deload. Hope you guys are with me. I can't hear anybody.
I'm listening.
Oh, gotcha.
No, it is here. Just a lot of stuff to take.
Got it. Yeah, well, if you guys have questions, like, let me know. So yeah, so you can take a week off from training, right? You don't have to fully stop training. You just want to do a gentle deload. Sometimes it takes a full week off, but you don't necessarily have to. Other things you can do, you can implement a significant change to your routine. So you guys know that NASM loves to go in like training cycles, right? If you look at like NASM annual plan, they've got this template that you can borrow from their website here that sort of breaks up your annual plan here, right? This is like moving through different levels of the OPT. This can be a very effective way to change things up. So let's say in January, you start with like stabilization exercises, right? But in February, you go into hypertrophy, and in March, you're going to go into like max strength, right? Or power, right? Those are very substantial differences between exercises. This is sort of what we were looking at when we were talking about like doing 3 types of circuits, right? So you can do circuit training in January, February, and March, but different workouts, right? Different routines. And then just repeat that. You go back into April, you go right back into stabilization and repeat, right? This would be a pretty good way to get generally fit, right? Something very simple like that. Other ways you can like adjust this, right? Like if you're a max strength lifter, let's say you're, trying to be like a power lifter, start with stabilization pretty early on, right? And then work your way in through between like hypertrophy, max strength, hypertrophy, max strength, and then like probably time to reset by that point. So then you come back over here, boop, 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 and reset, and then you're back over here. That's a really good way to keep from plateauing as well. So big changes in a routine can be effective, and you can stay in one phase for more than 1 month, guys. Like if you want to, let's say your annual plan looks something like this. In January you're in stabilization to kind of get everything set up, but then like you're just like, I'm just trying to get big, and you're just like, you want to be in hypertrophy, maybe get a little bit of max strength in there every now and then reset. That actually can be fine, but do a slightly different routine. It's still a hypertrophy routine, but rather than doing upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body, right? Rather than doing like a 2-day split like that, why don't you change it up and do a bro split? Do chest day, leg day, back day, shoulder day, arm day, or you have like chest, shoulders, and upper back, and then your other day is like legs and arms, legs, biceps, and triceps. Like that's not bad. There's different ways you can lay things out, different training splits out there. All are really popular, and they're all very good ways to kind of change things up. Or instead of doing a bench press, change it and start doing a dumbbell chest press. Instead of doing a pull up, do a chin up. Instead of doing a barbell squat, do a front squat. Little changes like that are enough to usually result in like a big, break into your plateau. You've been running, go get on a spin bike. Another thing you can do to break a plateau is just encourage your client to move more. Just try to increase their caloric expenditure through like maybe going for walks every day. That can be a really effective way to do this. So there's actually, have you guys ever watched, like anybody in here ever watched like Will Tennyson? He is not like a physiologist, but he is kind of, I think he got his personal training certification, but he's kind of a fun guy. He's like, I think he's a weirdo, and I think it's really fun, but he does like these really interesting kind of goofy videos. But one of the things I like about him is like he was very overweight, and then like he kind of got his life in order and like changed things up, so now he'll do these like fun experiments. One of them that he did that looked absolutely brutal is he was doing like, I think he was trying to get 25,000 steps in a day. So he would do these like super long walks, and like by the end of it he was so sore, he had like all these blisters on his feet and stuff. I'm not saying you have to do that, but he lost a crazy amount of weight that week because it just created a super intense caloric deficit because he didn't adjust his workout routine. He kept working out the same amount, but he increased all of his other activity outside of that way more. And it was just fun. It was just kind of a fun one. He's like, do I think you should do this? Definitely not. Like, he's like, this nearly killed me, but it was like a big plateau buster for him. Now, one of the ways you can also break a plateau, guys, is actually increase your water intake. So it seems kind of surprising, but a lot of times people who are consuming extra calories and not really realizing it, oftentimes thirst is mistaken for hunger. Like a lot of times your body is like, look, I'm thirsty, you need to hydrate me, and I know there is some water in food, so you know what, if you're not going to drink anything, then you should at least eat something. And so your body will increase like its thirst levels. or I'm sorry, it'll increase its hunger levels because it is thirsty. So if you consume enough water, it can actually be a good way to kind of bust up a plateau sometimes and keep you from intaking like more calories than you necessarily mean to. It makes it much easier to, for your willpower to kind of stick to it. And then one other thing on the other side, like if we're starting to get away from the actual plateau stuff, one thing that you can do that should be important anytime your client does plateau, make sure you take the time to reassess your long-term and your short-term goals, right? Like if your client is on like a long-term goal and they're starting to lose sight of what is motivating them and they're losing motivation, they might fall off the wagon, right? They simply might lose interest, and then they aren't giving they're not giving you maximal effort anymore. They're dogging it in the gym. They're falling off the wagon consistently, right? If that's the case, maybe it's time to be like, look, maybe it was a little extreme for us to try to lose 1.5 pounds a week. That seems like it's very hard for you to stick to and not very realistic for your lifestyle. Why don't we readjust? Let's go for 3/4 pound a week, right? And if they're like, no, like I can do this, and it's like, all right, well, what about 1 pound a week, right? Like making a small adjustment like that, reassessing their goals can be a really good way to get them back up. Because honestly, like, I would rather someone lose weight consistently than have somebody lose like a massive amount of weight, not be able to maintain it, fall off the wagon, and then leave the gym and, drop out of the program, right? Like that's not what I want, The PFT program, by the way, back in the day, it used to be way more homework. It used to be like, these like 30 questions on homeworks and stuff. And then like they were going out on like a crazy chaotic schedule. Like it would be like you'd have it like, 3 homeworks in a row, like day 1, day 2, day 3, and then nothing, and then like a 40-question homework on day 5. It was just like very chaotic and very, very random. And so it was like one of those things where it's like, look, if we can increase the quality of this to make it actually worth it so that people are like motivated to do it, they're much more likely to actually stick to it. And that I would much rather have someone consistently like flexing their muscles and flexing their brain than I would somebody who like works really hard one day and then completely blows it off for the rest of the week. Same thing is true of like exercise. Another way to break somebody out of a plateau if they are losing motivation. I think that these two are honestly very tied together. But increase their social support, right? Get their friends and family involved. Make their friends and family aware of their goals, and that can like motivate them towards like meeting their goals, right? Like if they get to a place where they're just like, I don't know, I'm just not as interested anymore, right? Like they're just losing motivation. Bring in the family, bring in the friends, right? Get them remotivated. And then always encourage self-monitoring, guys. One of the best things you can do, honestly, is get your clients to use a freaking food journal. Food journals are such a valuable tool, whether that's MyFitnessPal, actually logging it physically in a real journal, or even just like, catching up every now and then at the end of the day and just writing it out on scratch paper. Like it doesn't matter. We just know that like food journaling is one of the most effective tools we have. One of the biggest things that people struggle with is awareness. Like so many people just don't have awareness. And so when you can draw their attention to awareness, that is huge. I love workout journals. I will never stop talking about how much I love workout journals. I cannot encourage you enough to get your own freaking workout journal and write every pound that you lift, the number of sets, the number of reps. You should always be tracking that. I used it this morning against my roommate. He was like, this is definitely heavier. And I'm like, it's not. Look, it says it right here. I wrote it down last time. It's like, you have done this much weight before. And he's like, ugh. It felt like, he was like, I don't want to do it. And I was like, well, you've done it in the past. So if you don't want to do it, hey, you are welcome to regress. But like, my job is here to help you progress. And he was like very upset about it. But it's a good argument, it keeps you accountable, now, a lot of times what will happen when somebody plateaus is they will start seeking out supplements. They'll start seeking out things that will sort of boost their results, right? This is where, like, again, people will take supplements, they'll take steroids sometimes, they'll do anything to sort of boost results. So There are some dietary supplements that are okay and safe, I guess, but prescription ones are often going to have like certain side effects and unwanted things that are going to kind of come along with taking that drug. And that's what a side effect is, right? To the drug, it's not a side effect. It's just, it's just an effect. So dietary supplements can be effective. You just want to make sure that like you are not picking any of the ones that are dangerous. So make sure they are working with their physician to determine, what type of supplements are going to be safe and effective for them. Have them talk to you, talk to them about like what these are, like honestly, I am not a big fan of supplementation, but if you have a client who's just like, look, I'm just like losing motivation. I don't, I just feel like I don't have any energy in the gym. And it's like, well, you are on a calorie deficit diet. Your body is trying to balance. Yeah, probably doesn't feel very good on those limited calories. And they're like, I was thinking about taking a pre-workout. And it's like, maybe we try to adjust your calories first. But if you want to take like a pre-workout, which is basically just caffeine at the end of the day, that can be a tool to be used. So aiding your clients through a body plateau is a big deal to help your clients with their long-term success. Although plateaus are going to happen for very many reasons, we do know at the end of the day, it comes from that first law of thermodynamics. There's a lot of things in the background, but we do know that the reason they are plateauing is because of the math. Calories in versus calories out have balanced out. So we got to figure out what's actually causing that balance. Is it because their metabolism has slowed down? Is it because they are not burning as many calories as they think they are? Is it because they're not sticking to the program? What's happening, right? You got to sort of think outside the box. You got to look at all factors and try to figure out what's going on. But I promise you this, guys, every one of your clients is going to plateau at some point. It happens to everyone. So using the right strategy for the right person is really the trick. And that's it. That's chapter 8. Any questions, guys? How y'all feeling?
Good.
Good.
Understanding this stuff.
Alrighty. This one, love this chapter. Chapter 9 is so fun. Let's talk about some weight management myths. So we want you guys to understand some of the myths that are out there so that you can help your clients understand how they are often a fallacy, and then you can sort of educate them on what's actually true. So in the world of nutrition, good Lord, there is so much crap information out there. In the realm of exercise, there's so much crap information out there. Like there's just a lot of like misinformation. And so we're going to look at some of the popular ones so we can sort of dispel those. So, what about like, is a high protein, super low carbohydrate diet, right? Ketogenic diets, Atkins, zone diet, South Beach diet, those things, are they better for losing weight, right? Oftentimes, these are the type of diets that put you into ketosis. Now, is ketosis bad for you? Not necessarily, as long as you are balancing out, like ketone bodies do make you more acidic. They're the byproduct of low carbohydrate consumption. Your body burns fat for fuel rather than burning carbohydrates. And so most of your diet is fat, right? That's what a ketogenic diet is. So the byproduct of that are these excess ketone bodies that are flowing around in your blood. Now, if you've got epilepsy, by the way, guess what? That's amazing for you. Go keto. It's great because those ketone bodies actually interrupt the process that creates epilepsy in the brain. Love that, but does that mean it's a superior way to lose weight? Not necessarily. Now, I'm not saying it can't help you lose weight. For the record, like, yeah, anytime you're in a caloric deficit, guys, you're going to lose weight. So if you're in a caloric deficit on a keto diet, cool, go for it, but to say that it's superior or better than like just a standard diet is sort of a myth, right? I think that if it works for you and you enjoy it, awesome. One of the things about a keto diet that honestly makes it very easy to stick to is that it's just a very high fat diet, and I will say I'm very grateful for the keto diet to exist because like the amount of like health foods that have come out in the last few years that are like really healthy, but also like relatively tasty. I'm stoked about it. Like it has made some really clever like chefs out there, you know. But this is what a keto diet would kind of look like, right? Salmon with a little salad, a little side salad, egg bites with like, those look like bell peppers, which to me seem high in sugar, but whatever. More fish and another salad, right? This is pretty good. Like you start your morning with coffee, right? You get steak, like this is the type of diet. Like people are like, yeah, I can stick to that ish, like let's go. Great. You know what? If you can stick to it and it's not harming you, fine. But again, as like a fitness professional, it would be irresponsible for me to say that that is superior to a regular diet. I'm also not saying a regular diet is superior to that. I think that like, there are drawbacks and benefits to both sides. There's pros and cons to everything, right? So the one thing I will say is that if you are on like a super high protein diet, that often means that you are getting a lot of extra saturated fat in your diet, which could result in heart disease. Also, high protein diets with a lot of meat often do result in an increased amount of sodium in the diet, which that can cause problems as well. That increased sodium intake can cause like cardiorespiratory problems, just like the saturated fat can. You can also become very depleted in your glycogen stores, which can result in low blood sugar and poor blood sugar control. But again, there are some benefits, right? High fat diets suppresses your appetite, makes you feel full very long. It's an easy diet to stick to. High protein diets, same thing. It results in your body feeling full for very long. But the other problem, flipping back over to the other side, another con is that it does very much limit your food choices, which sometimes if you limit so many food choices, you just end up eating nothing. So then you don't get enough calories. So like that can be sort of a negative side effect as well. So which is better? Again, I don't think it works that way. But that is sort of a myth there, right? If it works for you, no judgments. You know what I mean? We just don't want to say that like there's one end all be all way like approach to things. That's what's sort of irresponsible. Now, what about carbohydrates? Carbohydrates make you fat, right? That's what we're told. We're told carbs are the enemy nowadays, right? This is just like fat being villainized back in the day. It used to be that like low fat was all the craze, and like fat is what makes you fat. That used to be the approach, and now it's like nope, carbs make you fat, right? We're totally flipping the other way. So carbohydrates always result in weight gain. They, because you're producing insulin. So like the idea that like insulin is a bad hormone and it is bad for you is sort of a myth, right? Like insulin is a hormone that your pancreas makes when it needs to pull sugar out of your blood to store it. Now, yes, it will store it and convert it into triglycerides if you don't have your glycogen stores empty. But if you've emptied out your glycogen stores, it's just going to convert it into glycogen to be used for energy later. That's great. We love insulin. But yes, because we live in a world with way too much sugar in our diet and very many like high glycemic index foods, what ends up happening is, yeah, your and because we don't move very much, we're not moving around, we're not getting enough exercise. What ends up happening is your glycogen stores just remain full. And so when they remain full, what ends up happening is when you eat like a very high carbohydrate meal, it doesn't have anywhere to go, so it gets converted into fat. And then insulin was this thing that was responsible for fat production. But it's like, is it insulin's fault or is it the way we live our lives? Like the other hormone that your body is going to make is glucagon. This is sort of the anti-insulin. Glucagon is made by your pancreas that tells your body to release glucose from your glycogen stores. So when you are exercising, for instance, glucagon is going to pull glucose out of your glycogen stores to keep your blood sugar levels normal. That's great. One more reason why we love exercise. So to function optimally, we want to make sure that we keep our blood sugar levels in a normal range. We can pay attention to our glycemic index, The glycemic index is a way for us to classify how much certain foods raise your blood sugar. So like high sugar foods are going to spike your blood sugar, causing an overproduction of insulin, causing an over storage of all those calories. If it's going into your glycogen, that's probably fine. But chances are, if you're creating that much insulin, it's probably converting it into fat. So generally, we want to focus on low glycemic index foods, right? But at the end, that's showing us that like it's not carbohydrates that are bad for us. It's sugar. Sugar is not that great. It has very little nutrients. It raises your blood sugar. There are a lot of drawbacks there. And because sugar is an example of carbohydrates, we have sort of villainized carbohydrates in the last, few years. What about like the next myth? What about like, well, if you want to lose weight, just eat way less calories. Why don't you go on like 1,000, 1,200 calorie diet? I know plenty of people who have done this and they swear by it, right? Yeah, I think that you can do that, but oftentimes you will lose a rapid amount of weight in the beginning because you're going to tap into your glycogen stores because again, your body is dieting, right? So you lose a lot of weight in the beginning and then end up like gaining it all back later. Very low calorie diets are super low, even as low as like 1,200 calories sometimes. Often are associated with like malnutrition. That's not great. And one of the common side effects is actually gallstones. Your liver keeps producing bile, and then but it doesn't have anything to necessarily like use that bile on. So then like it overproduces and just draws minerals into your liver. Those minerals make their way into your gallbladder and then they just sit there because like you don't have any reason. The gallbladder has no reason to secrete that bile into your small intestine. So then, little minerals start building up, a little bit of calcium here, a little bit of sodium there, right? And eventually they all sort of crystallize and it becomes this big stone. And that's what happens on super, super low calorie diets. Definitely don't want to do that because then what ends up happening is they got to take your freaking gallbladder out. That's not awesome, right? So we do not love ultra low calorie diets. Here's another common one. I didn't put this in the notes actually. Certain foods can help you burn fat, right? Make you lose weight. They have these like negative calorie foods. So there are some negative calorie foods out there. The idea with a negative calorie food is that it actually takes more energy to process that food than it does like the calories that you're getting from it. So you base your entire diet on like these negative calorie foods. The grapefruit diet was a very popular one back in the day because grapefruit was thought to be so acidic that it was going to like create negative calories, right? Celery is mostly fiber, right? That is not necessarily true. That is not how that works, right? Oftentimes, negative calorie diets are just a very low calorie diet in disguise. Like they're totally the same as the like ultra low calorie diet, just they look a little bit different. It's like, no, I'm allowed to eat as much grapefruit as I want. It's like, yeah, well, grapefruit just doesn't have that much calories in it. So you are getting 1,000 calories a day. That's why you're losing weight, but it's also why you feel like crap, you know? So there is no such thing as a negative calorie food. Low fat or fat free is going to translate to healthy. That's a myth, right? Again, this is the exact same conversation as low carbs. You need carbs, you need fat. Both of them are good. But yes, an excess of fat can be very bad for you. Too much saturated fat has been associated with heart disease, but it doesn't mean that you can't have saturated fat. Saturated fat has plenty of benefits as well, you know. But getting too much of it, yeah, that's where it's a problem. So low fat or fat free means healthy. No, that is a myth. Like that is not how that works. Ideally, we want to just focus on like healthy eating, right? Try to get a balance to your calories, right? Oftentimes low fat foods, they got to find some way to make them taste good, guys. So they're going to be high in sugar, or they'll be really high in protein, which gets converted into sugar later on anyways. What about just like skipping a meal, right? It's like, oh, well, I just don't have breakfast, right? Now, I'm not against intermittent fasting. I think intermittent fasting can be fine. But one of the problems with it, if you don't do it properly, is that it results in way too much hunger. You get a client who gets really, really, really freaking hungry. And then when that happens, they end up like, just skipping meal. They end up overeating later down the line. So then like they can't really explain why they are still gaining weight. So after somebody like skips a meal, they'll be way hungrier the next time, and then they're going to just make up for those calories or eat way too many calories. That's like binge eating disorder, right? So skipping meals is a very effective way to lose weight. I would argue the opposite. Now, if you are on like a fast and like an intermittent fasting diet, where you have like, you've already tracked out your calories, and like you've got an actual meal plan that you're going to stick to, that I don't necessarily, okay, there's a supplement in here, so obviously I hate that. But like, this is fine. Like here's a little protein shake, right? It's like you get an omelet, you get a little snack, another meal, protein shake, dinner. It's probably around your workout, right? That's fine. This actually works. I don't hate this, but like that's the thing you want to make sure that you're focusing on. You want to make sure that like, you are actually getting the right number of calories if you are going to do intermittent fasting. You'll notice intermittent fasting didn't necessarily make the myths list, by the way. I'm not against intermittent fasting. I think that there's some fun science to it. I don't practice it personally, but I do know that there is some fun stuff that they've been looking at for like hormone production and stuff. What about eating at night? This is a really common one. I hear this all the time. Like, oh, you shouldn't eat at night because then, you're going to go to bed. And so all your calories are just going to get turned into fat because you're not burning any energy. It doesn't really matter, guys. Your energy burn is over the course. So if you eat at night and then you go to bed, yeah, all those calories are going to enter into your body, and they're, they're going to get stored in the same way they would. But then you're going to be active in the morning. If you create a calorie deficit, it doesn't cause any weight. Now, where did this sort of myth come from? Well, I think that like that makes sense, which it doesn't actually work that way, but it does make sense. You're like, oh yeah, I'm not burning anything, so yeah, it gets stored. But I think another thing is there is a difference between eating at night and thinking that it causes weight versus like night eating syndrome or NES. That actually does cause a lot of like weight gain in a lot of clients, and a lot of people struggle with this. And what happens is they go on like a really low calorie diet all day. They get hungry, they're starving, and by nighttime rolls around, they lose their willpower. And they're just like, I just got to put something in my body. And then they just overeat. And that's actually like a disordered eating complex. That absolutely does cause a lot of weight gain because they end up bringing in way too many calories. It has nothing to do with the fact that it was at night. It has everything to do with too many calories coming in. What about being vegetarian? Vegetarian is a good way to lose weight, right? No, the vegetarian, like again, Oreos are vegan. French fries are vegan, like vegetarian does not necessarily mean healthy. That's not what that means, right? There is a lot of Coca-Cola is vegan, doesn't necessarily translate to healthiness, right? Now, plant-based diets are super high in fiber, and you guys know I love fiber, right? They're super high in nutrients, vitamins and minerals, right? They're super high in phytochemicals. Love it. I love a vegetarian diet. I love a vegan diet. I think it's fine, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's superior to a regular diet, at the end of the day. You want to be vegan? Great. I support you, but to say that it's better is that's just not how this works, what if you eat red meat? You can't be healthy if you eat red meat. Red meat is bad for you. Not necessarily. Like, don't get me wrong, it's high in cholesterol, it's high in saturated fat, but it's got a lot of like really positive aspects as well. And so, getting like red meat into your diet actually is a pretty good way to fill up your iron and certain minerals and stuff. And it's really high in protein. that cholesterol might not even necessarily be absorbed. We're still having trouble understanding like what dietary cholesterol actually means in terms of like the cholesterol in our blood and stuff. So it can be fine. I wouldn't do it all the time. You know, I try to limit my red meat consumption to once or twice a week, you know. But yeah, it can be effective. Again, it's calories, guys. What about more protein means more muscle? No, the body needs enough protein, right? Which we talked about, right? Anywhere from 0.5 to 0.8 grams per pound. So it's like 1.2 to 1.7, right? That's how much you need. So like I weigh 175 pounds. I need between 87 and a half to 140 grams a day. That's enough to ensure that I am at a positive nitrogen balance. On days where I work out really intensely, maybe I'll take it up a little bit higher, right? Maybe I go all the way up to 1 gram per pound, you know, which would be 2.2 grams per kilogram. But like more protein, you know, your body can only create so much repair. And here's the other thing, right? Let's say you eat a massive amount of protein and don't work out that day. Do you think your body's just going to make more muscle? No, it can only repair whatever got damaged, and it can only repair so much. So if you're damaging your muscle too much while getting, you know, an adequate amount of protein, that's not going to result in muscle growth, right? If you damage your muscle a lot and bring in way too much protein, your body's going to fix all the damage, and then all the excess is just going to get converted into calories, into glucose, and you're going to burn it for energy. You have to exercise at a low intensity. This is a classic one. Low intensity exercise, like the fat burning zone, right, is going to be more effective for burning fat rather than high intensity exercise. High intensity, low intensity, doesn't really matter, guys. It's going to be all about the overall caloric expenditure. However, I will say I'm not a big fan of the fat burning zone because, like, in order to stay in the fat burning zone, you just don't burn very many calories. It's way too much time to spend in the gym. I love the gym, but if you're in there for hours and hours and hours, I'd say go to a HIIT class, burn your bunch of calories, and get out of there. You know, like, yeah, most of your calories are going to come from carbohydrates. But the thing is, when you're at low intensity for the rest of the day, your body, anytime you bring in carbohydrates, they're just going to go to restore your glycogen. And guess what? That means that they can't be converted into fat. Oh, suddenly you have to burn fat for fuel. It's a roundabout way to do it, you know. It's like writing a check rather than using your debit card. Debit card is going to pull the money out of your account instantly, right? Check might take a couple days to come through, but it's still the same amount of money going out. What about females getting bulky? Classic, right? Women who don't want to lift weights because they're afraid of getting too big, right? Honestly, there's a huge hormonal difference between men and women. Men have about 20, maybe 30 times the amount of testosterone as women do. So that means that honestly, gaining muscle mass is very, very difficult for women. Honestly, women have a more predominance for type 1 muscle fibers, which is why women tend to be better at endurance sports than men are. You look at like the difference between men and women, like male powerlifters versus female powerlifters, the amount of weight lifted is a substantial difference. But that number, that amount gets way smaller when you get into like endurance events. And that is because women have a predisposition for type 1 muscle fibers, which don't look too bulky. So honestly, regardless of like how hard a lot of women train, getting bulky is very, very difficult for most women. Now, strength gains can happen very similar, you know, which is great. But that being said, I would definitely encourage my female clients to engage in as much strength training as possible. What about sugar making you fat? That's another common one. We hear this all the time, right? Sugar makes you fat. I did say sugar is not so great, you know, but really what we're talking about there is like refined sugars. You know, natural sugars, if you're avoiding like fruits to avoid sugar, or if you're avoiding like, you know, a carbohydrate like a vegetable that has like sugars in it, that those things are way more beneficial than the sugar is damaging you, you know. So it's refined foods that tend to be not so great. Soda, cookies, candy, things like that. that's not what we're talking about. So we want to say like, hey, let's reduce our conversation needs to be different, right? Let's reduce the refined sugars rather than don't eat sugars. Those are two different ways to have that conversation. Honestly, guys, you can have 10% of your diet every day. That's the best way to do it. Say like, hey, let's try to keep the added sugars. And by the way, you're seeing that more on nutrition facts panels. You're seeing this way more on nutrition labels now. They're adding like the number of grams of added sugars. Let's just try to keep this to less than 10% of our calories every day, and you're going to be in a good spot, right? So if you're on like a 2,000 calorie diet, right, 10 grams of sugar, that's 40 grams from additional sugars divided by 2,000. Oops. That is 2% of your calories for the day. So you could have 5 of those. don't do that, but you still could. And honestly, you're probably in a good spot. Keep it to 10% or less is what we recommend. And what about starvation mode prevents weight loss? So this is the last myth of the day. This is a really common one. It's like, hey, if you don't get enough calories, your metabolism will slow down. Hopefully by now we've talked about how that is not very true. Some studies have shown a slight reduction in cellular metabolism. However, they found that to be pretty reversible for the most part. But then flipping back to the other side, we do know that severely restricted calories where you are like a starvation diet causes mood swings, malnutrition, and then causes you to just lay around and not move all day. It's because your body is trying to find a way to balance out, which is none of those things are good. So that is why we should avoid starvation diets. But to say that it slows your metabolism isn't exactly accurate. And those are all the myths we're going to talk about today. So hopefully that has helped sort of demystify the world. Weight loss isn't magic. It really is just kind of understanding like where our calories are coming from and stuff. Where they're coming from, where they're going, I should say. And that's about it, guys. How y'all feeling? Joseph, John, Chris, Edwin?
I'm good.
You guys have questions?
Makes sense.
All righty.
I mean, it clarifies a lot. So, like all the stuff you keep hearing, because, there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, once you give somebody like a pretty good explanation about it, you're like, look, I get why it feels that way, but actually, like, here's what we know. It's a good way to kind of break it down for your clients, and it can make the conversation go a lot better. Because people get really personal about this stuff.
And you understand muscles and stuff. What's your take on the transgender athletes being allowed to compete against women as real women?
Oh, John.
Do you think that's fair?
So here's the thing. As I absolutely believe that like transgendered people are gonna have like you'll hear people, they'll like, I have a friend who's transgender, and like
I support them.
She's like, I just
the athletic part.
Yeah, I absolutely know that like I'm just in the wrong body, and so great, I totally support that. But I will say there is a lot of evidence that is pointing to when you have testosterone that predisposes your genetic, like the genes that express like muscle growth, it predisposes them towards producing type 2 muscle mass, right? So when that happens, you produce type 2 muscle fibers, making you more explosive, making you more powerful. And so if you are, born and you produced a substantial amount of testosterone for decades at a time, and then all of a sudden you're no longer doing that, you still have all of that muscle mass.
Yeah.
So I think that does give an unfair advantage in
And then, like you said, the women, no matter what, they can't bulk up that hard, no matter how hard they work. They never could be that big.
Right. Now, if it's a skill-based like thing, it's entirely skill-based, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily that big of a deal. But when it comes to, when it comes to power. I agree with you.
I agree with you. I think they use all these issues just to divide the population, where people are arguing amongst each other, you know?
Yeah, I
But-
will say, as a straight white male, I don't
Yeah.
say these things out loud very often.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. Like, I totally support these people and everything, but it's like, I mean, I feel like, damn, that sucks for women. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah, personally, I think it's like a challenging thing. But like I said, like I have a, a transgender friend that I play Ultimate with. She is an incredible athlete, but she does get to play on like the women's teams, and she just dominates. She's like
Dominates.
6'2", like you know.
Yeah, that's weird to me. We're living in a
She's
weird world.
actually it's really awesome. She just announced a couple weeks ago that like they're expecting their, so they've been like adopting and stuff, but they're expecting their first like kid soon, and I was like, that's awesome. You know?
Yeah. Hey, live and let live. I support
right.
that. Yeah.
So we're gonna, I was like, when are they gonna start playing frisbee, you know? Any other questions today, guys?
Nope.
Not
Alright.
really, huh?
What's that?
Oh no, I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, well, I'll go ahead and kill the recording.